So I'm joined in the studio by Mike Buchanan, leader of the Justice for Men and Boys and the Women Who Love Them party. You've been in the headlines really as an anti-feminist party.
Yes.
So what to you is a feminist?
We use the categorisation that was used by Christina Hoff Sommers, and she distinguished between two types of feminists. So she, to this day, calls herself a feminist as an equity feminist. So, if you like, a woman who believes in, or not necessarily a woman, but a person who believes in equality of opportunity and so on. But by that definition, we're all feminists today, aren't we? I mean, I honestly don't know anybody who would deny women equality of opportunity. It's kind of like, you know, that battle's been won. The other camp, though, she called gender feminists, but in the UK we would more normally call them radical feminists. And these are people, usually but not always women, who believe in special advantaging of women. So they're behind things like at Brunel University today, female postgraduate engineering students receive a grant of almost £23,000 purely on the grounds of gender. And to our minds, anybody who would support such a thing is a radical feminist. But radical feminism has been the gender ideology of the establishment for more than 30 years in the UK. It just drives everything. And in our manifesto, we have 20 areas where the human rights of men and boys are assaulted by the state's actions and inactions. And there are virtually none of those areas in which radical feminism hasn't made life worse for men and boys.
That's really interesting, because in all the media that you see about you, it tends to seem that you believe all feminists are evil and should be hated. So, I mean, I myself call myself a feminist,
Sure.
and I believe in the equality of men and women.
Yeah.
Does that make you think any less of me?
No, of course not. Because I mean, it sounds like you're an equity feminist, and we have no problem whatsoever with equity feminists, other than, I guess, they provide cover for radical feminists. So if you believe just in women, you know, in equality of opportunity, as I do, and 99% of people, I guess, today would, it is a meaningless term, feminist, in that sense, because, you know, all the battles that feminists used to fight for have been won. I mean, I mean, for 5 years now, I've been asking feminists to tell me one area where the state disadvantages women or girls, and in fact, they normally go a very strange colour when I do that, because they can't think of one. So they have this narrative that women are oppressed, but it's perfectly well understood why women are a minority in Parliament and in, let's say, major corporate boardrooms. And the prime reason for that was outlined by a world-renowned sociologist, Dr. Catherine Hackim, in 2000. And her research basically found that 4 in 7 British men are work-centred and only 1 in 7 British women. And it was something that echoed. I mean, I spent 30 years in the business sector, and it just confirmed what I had seen across those 30 years.
But don't you think that's a particularly damaging way to look at the world in which we live? Women make up more than 50% of the population, and by having views that see men as more likely to go into work and more likely to be successful, that we're limiting half or more than half of the population.
No, we aren't limiting anybody. The first time I voted in a general election was in 1979, which was the first of 3 elections won by Margaret Thatcher. Now, that was 36 years ago. The idea that women are limited by anything other than what's in their heads is just ridiculous.
But many would argue that Thatcher was actually a particularly masculine leader, and she had to play a different type of game. Even though she was a woman, it was almost irrelevant because she was such a macho leader living in such a macho world.
Well, no,
wouldn't your party just continue to exacerbate that issue?
No, she was competing with men on a level playing field, and that's what made her extraordinary. She was 1 in a billion, you know, in being prepared to do that. So the sort of women who are being appointed through all women shortlists, they're basically saying that they can't compete with men, and yeah.
I don't really think that's true. I think a lot of women are actually put in those positions because of the world in which we live, because of the patriarchal society in which we live, which people like you think is okay.
Absolute nonsense. I mean, the patriarchy theory, the feminist version of the patriarchy theory, is one of the most insane things that's ever entered a human being's head.
So you don't believe the patriarchy exists? So the gender pay gap isn't an example of the patriarchy?
Well, the gender pay gap,
or that 25% of chief executives and senior officials in the UK are women.
Okay,
the 75% are all men.
The gender pay gap between 20 and 30 is in women's favour. Women on average earn slightly more over that period, and it's only really in the 40s that it appears, and that's mainly because women at that age are not focusing on their careers; they're working part-time.
So
It's a myth.
So you're in denial that the pay gap exists?
No, I'm not in denial. It just doesn't exist. I mean, the gap exists, but the explanation for it is not what women say. And I think about 25 years ago, a guy called Warren Farrell in the States wrote a book, Why Men Earn More, and it's just so well understood why men earn more.
Why?
Because they go into higher paying professions.
Is that right?
Is that right?
Yeah, that their path in life is to put them into jobs that pay more.
Well, they choose to do what's required to get into higher paid work.
And women don't.
In general, women don't.
So I want to come back now to student life. This is student radio.
Yep.
Our audiences are students. Something that's happening here is the University Feminist Society are running a campaign on getting more men into feminism. I wondered what your view is on this and men who self-identify as feminists.
I think they're traitors to their own class. I did a blog post a couple of days ago. I think I googled Nottingham University and feminism, and I came up with you have a women's society, I think, don't you?
We have a feminist society
and
a women's network.
A women's network, sorry, yeah. But in 2013, someone took there was I think at the Freshers' Fair. So I guess some of those people will still be here.
One was me.
Oh, okay. I need feminism because. And it was just toe-curlingly embarrassing, some of the stuff that's put down. I need feminism because I have to go in a queue to go to the toilet, whereas men don't. I need feminism because boobs. I need feminism because I shouldn't have to explain why I need feminism. It was utterly pathetic.
I mean, I asked you to expand on that. In what way is that pathetic? I mean, what was meant there by, say, boobs, for example, is that women can be objectified purely based on their breasts. And feminism helps to protect women against the idea that all they are their bodies. It doesn't
protect anyone from anything. The idea that feminism protects anyone from anything is just a fantasy.
But you admitted yourself that you're a feminist, and an equity
no,
feminist,
an equity feminist. But equity feminism, for my lifetime, and I'm 57. Equity feminism has been of not the slightest consequence. It has been absolutely of zero importance, because the only form of feminism that's been influential politically, economically, and in other ways has been radical feminism.
Okay, so what do you then think of the male students who self-identify as feminists, who would disagree with you fundamentally and feel so strongly that women are not supported in the society in which we live, that they themselves want to take it on?
I think they don't understand feminism.
Perhaps it's you that doesn't understand feminism.
I think I understand it pretty well. I've written 3 books about it.
Feminism in 2015, is that what you understand? Or do you understand feminism in books of radical writers that were writing in different contexts?
No, I'm talking about, I go back to the point that the only form of feminism which is of the slightest damned consequence is radical feminism. And misogyny is actually a very rare phenomenon, and misandry is a very common one.
I'm not sure how many of them would agree with you on that.
Well, I don't know either, but it'd be good to do a straw poll after this.
Well, we have had some questions in from students, actually, to you. So one from Sarah, who's a first-year economics student, asks, do you think a campaign filled with hatred of one group of society is a positive way to get into politics?
We haven't any hatred towards women.
Just radical feminists?
Radical feminists. We hate, yes, perfectly open about that.
OK, and we've got another question from Katie, who's a third-year business student. She's interested in what your party is going to do for students if you get into power.
What are we going to do for students? Something that we won't do for students is what's happening at Brunel University, which is to pay, which is to give £23,000 to people of just the one gender. I mean, other than that, I mean, we really don't have much to say about students. So something like 60% of university students today are women. It was the ratio was the opposite when I was a student about 36 years ago. You know, in education more widely, we're calling for single-sex schools, and in the case of boys, with all male teaching staff, to be options for communities that want them.
Okay, I think we'll leave it there. Thank you for joining us today, Mike.
Thank you, Emma. It's been a pleasure.
We've had loads of responses, particularly from men, actually, which is really interesting, particularly concerned about how Mike Buchanan, the leader of this party, said that they were traitors really to their own kind for being a feminist. We've had a text in from Sam that says, I'm a man, I'm a feminist, that doesn't make me a traitor. If anything, that makes me someone in favour of equality in areas such as the pay gap, which definitely exists. We've had another one in from Stephen which says, as a man, the only problem I face due to my gender are because of the expectations promoted by the patriarchy. If anyone wants men to be liberated from this, they should support feminism. So I think this is quite an interesting idea, and I wondered what you around the table thought about Mike's views, and particularly on his view of men being feminists as well. How did you feel about that?
I think in general, I think men should be feminists. If men are in favour of equality of the sexes, they should be feminists. It doesn't mean that they're a traitor to their own kind. It just means that they want to live in my opinion, they want to live in a right, just and equal world. And to say that they're a traitor for believing this, I think is absolutely appalling.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would class myself as, what did he call it? The what was it?
An equity feminist.
Equity feminist. I'll class myself as an equity feminist. But like what he came out with, some of that. I mean, you know, you basically put to him, Emma. Well, here's the gender gap in employment. 25% of women are employed in top jobs.
Yeah,
75% of men, or something like that.
Yeah,
chief executives, and how he kind of didn't see that as clearly a gender gap, I'd never understand really.
And also when he said that men were making sure that they got themselves into high paid jobs and that women weren't doing this and that we're not interested in getting into these high powered jobs, that was absolutely, what an appalling statement to make.
If that were the case, then women wouldn't even go to university. We'd be content sitting at home going, oh, I can't wait to get married and have children.
And it's ridiculous, isn't it? I think, I don't quote me on it, but more students at the moment are female than male, and this does not show females who aren't interested in getting good jobs and who aren't interested in careers. This actually shows women who are progressing, and we really are interested in our education and in our careers.
Going back to the male feminist point, I think it will make a difference for men as well if feminism is more widely accepted. I mean, feminism means equality of the sexes, and that means that in things like having custody of the child after a divorce, it means that men will have equal rights with women, whereas at the moment women have the upper hand. And I think that is often overlooked in debates about feminism, that people will benefit regardless of gender.
Yeah, I mean, that is an interesting thing, and I think some of the things in this manifesto do make sense. There are areas where men are disadvantaged compared to women, and gender is clearly a really important issue in modern society. Chris messaged in about this in regards to the grants he was talking about at universities, which is also obviously really important to us. So he said, does he not understand that grants like this are, and the Marie Curie grant, for example, exist to encourage women into increasingly gender-divided disciplines, like engineering, for example? Do you think that's a positive way? Are you in favour of this sort of positive discrimination in that respect, or do you think perhaps Mike has a point there?
I think there is a point with positive discrimination, like you said, it's about gender equality feminism, and if you are, obviously there is a problem with the things like the sciences, which there are less women in, but I think there's a different way to get women involved rather than throwing money at them. I think you need to engage them more at school, and you need to tackle what the stereotypes of girls being good at English and boys being good at maths. You need to tackle that, but I don't think positive discrimination and throwing money at you if you do a PhD in engineering and you're a girl, I really don't think that's the way forward.
I don't think any sort of discrimination is a positive discrimination, because you're still negatively affecting somebody. And yeah, I think you're right, Meg. They do need to be targeted at schools, where it should stop being stigmatised for girls to enjoy maths and science, and it should stop being stigmatised for boys to enjoy things like food technology, for example, or English, or any of those other girly subjects.
I just want to go back to one point from earlier. The fact that he basically claimed that there isn't really misogyny anymore, which I think is just one of the most stupid things I've ever heard. I mean, as a male at university, I can honestly say that misogyny still very much exists. And the fact of the matter is, with these attitudes of, there isn't really discrimination against women anymore, everyone is feminist, everyone in this class is feminist because everyone believes in women's rights. Well, clearly not. You know, there is still so much that is wrong with the, you know, we talk so much on your end about the lag culture and misogyny at younger ages, and for someone to come out and say, well, that issue is dealt with now, let's put it behind us, let's not keep, you know, bringing this up, that's just sweeping it under the carpet, and it's so wrong and very dangerous as well.
What also really worried me about that is coupling it with that, what he said about instigating all boys schools with all male teachers, like that. If we still live in a society of misogyny, how is that going to help at all if you just keep all boys together?
Yeah, there's some really interesting points. I just wanted to, probably as a final point, to look at the way he's conducting this campaign. It's very much an anti-feminist campaign. I just wondered what your views are looking ahead to the general election, with all the parties coming out with their campaigning tactics. If you think this is a positive way of promoting politics in modern day, and what you think about his tactics in doing so.
Well, it's not, is it? I mean, you know, when the question was put to him, what can he do for students? He didn't say anything. He said, what we won't do for students is take away that money, which proves it's just a very negative political way to go about things.
I think he almost sort of didn't do himself any favours by saying that everybody today is a feminist, because if everybody today is a feminist and you are an anti-feminist party, you are basically making yourself completely unelectable. Nobody's going to vote for something that they completely disagree with.